Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the ReluTech Podcast. I am glad to have a second-time guest on board. This is Jeremiah Cantu from Innovative Solutions. I'm actually no third-time guest. We have talked about well-architected framework reviews. We have talked about Tailwinds AI, and this is kind of a new development related to the previous one on Tailwinds AI, where a month or two ago, you had told me that something you guys have been working on internally, you decided to let loose into the world, it sounds like.
Yes, and we were super excited at the time. It was something that we had started as kind of like a brainchild of Tailwinds. It was like there's things we have internally that we're doing a lot of, and I think a lot of a lot of partners, a lot of companies will look at stuff that we're doing and we're like, we're really not drinking our own champagne. How can we benefit from this? And what kind of came out of that, it was kind of the meeting of those two ideas. Lots of stuff we're doing repeat, lots of stuff that we built, really cool stuff comes together to create Darcy IQ, as we call it, which is just it's a generative AI assistant. It's very, very custom built, but very customizable as well, and has a lot of cool features. So we're really excited about.
Yeah, and I was excited. I think that for the people watching today, if you are maybe in a consulting side of the business, if you're someone who works on the hyperscaler side, if you're someone who works at one of the big public cloud companies like that, AWS, Azure, whatever, you might have an interest in a tool like this because it's able to cover some pretty common situations that everyone in this business are going to find themselves in. It does a few different things. Like you said, Jeremiah, it is a bit customizable, it looks like. Mostly because I think because it's built from Tailwinds. Like you said, you were building this so you could utilize your software. And for anyone viewing who hasn't seen that podcast yet, I'd recommend it. But just a quick refresher, Tailwinds is a generative AI application to let you build other generative AI applications. It has a variety of integrations built in, models built in. We played around with it a little bit to show people how that worked in one of the previous podcasts. So go view that if you have more interest there. But in this unique case, this tool was built for a consulting company, right? This was for Innovative Solutions and how they pursue business for customers. Anyone who has worked in the consulting space knows a pretty common workflow, which is I'm going to have a call with someone. We're going to learn about what they're trying to do. And then I am going to create an SOW and I'm going to do some architecture diagrams. And we are going to start coming up with a plan for some type of work we can do together. Um, in short,
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly you're absolutely, I mean, yes.
in short, that's what we're going to do with Darcy. Darcy's going to be our little assistant on this one, where right now on this call, Darcy's listening. Darcy is our note taker right now. But as Jeremiah shares his screen, you're going to start understanding what Darcy's been learning from what we've been talking about so far. And then we're going to show you from there, just having a casual conversation about a fake migration, what this tool is going to generate after the fact. So, Jeremiah, take it away. It's your show now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Chris mentioned, uh a huge part of this is what we call our Darcy meeting, right? And you'll notice at the top that um, the meeting summary is already flowing. Um, it says unnamed host, but I can tell you right now the host name is actually Chris Youngblood with ReluTech Nerd Rabbit fame. Um, and as you watch he and I interact, I'll switch over to, like a typical customer interaction, like a a sales call here in just a second. But um, one of the things you'll notice is that there'll be some questions that show up here. But really, it's better to just do it. So I'll just say, "Hey, Chris, it's great to speak with you finally. I've been looking forward to this conversation. What we're really is trying to identify, and I thank you for reaching out to us, is how innovative solutions could potentially help your company with their migration. But before I get into that, could you kind of give me an overview of what are you looking to accomplish with this migration or with your current infrastructure?
Yeah, Jeremiah. So it really was a few different things. We'd always been thinking about with the public cloud space about migrating. It sounds like there could be some cost benefits down the line if we do some things right. But we are trying to expedite some plans. We have had some changes in what our future VMware support bills may be looking like. And we decided we really want to just do some quick lift and shifts of about 100 servers that we have into AWS as quickly as possible so we can start decommissioning that hardware, kind of getting the physical infrastructure space behind us. And from there, once we're actually settled, focus solely on the cloud and how we can modernize and kind of reach that other side. So that's what brings us to the call today. I was trying to figure out really what the best path forward for taking on something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's all really great context. And you said there's about 100 servers in your current infrastructure, right? Um, would there be, are these virtual servers? Are these physical servers? Or what does that look like? What does that footprint look like?
Yeah, so those are actually 100 physical servers. So if we're going into virtual servers, we have 800 something right now. I'd have to check to be sure.
Okay, it's about 800 servers. Um, and are those all Windows and on the operating system layer? Um, kind of thinking backwards, are they all
Primarily Linux.
primarily Linux? Okay. Could you tell me, maybe give me a little bit more about the hypervisor technologies that they're using?
As far as it goes, as I mentioned, we were using VMware for our virtualization. As a I hate to break it to everyone, I'm not actually a data center expert.
You could say anything. That's fine. That's fine. If you need to, find that out later and get back with me,
Yeah,
totally acceptable, right?
far as it
Would
goes, I was maybe getting this call going just because I'm going to be key in the decision process, but I didn't really bring any of our systems people in quite yet, just because I wanted to get some initial conversations going. So I just knew some of these big driving cost factors for leaving.
And would they, those folks who you need to bring maybe for a next call, maybe if we want to have a next call next week sometime, um, are those your systems administrators? Do you work with any other providers to support that infrastructure?
Yeah, so right now our infrastructure is actually contracted out to another company who manages that for us. But it's someone who we have basically a full-time team and we're able to engage them as needed.
Okay, so you've got several different, a couple of different folks in the, or different folks or different cooks in the kitchen, as you'd say, right? What about your actual business application, right? Is your customer base overseas, US based? Is it global? What does that look like?
Primarily US based. We have a platform that a lot of different online retailers use as ways to run promotional programs on their e-commerce site. So primarily US based customers.
Okay, so that's super helpful. And your um your customers that are primarily US based, do you have a pretty steady usage pattern, or is there any like uptime SLAs you give with your end users?
It's not steady necessarily. It's kind of cyclical in terms of retail cycles. So a lot of these different programs are going to be used more heavily around maybe holiday times and other times where different loyalty programs may be running initiatives. So we do kind of tend to see a varying load.
Okay. And then the at the application layer, can you give me, and it's okay if you don't know any of the questions of this, but is there what type of like code language are you running? What does that application code look like?
Yeah, so primarily our development team, I believe, is working with Python backend, JavaScript front end type technologies. Um, Angular, I think, is a factor for how they're doing the front end. So I think it's pretty typical kind of modern development stack.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know. And do you have any other like what about compliance or security? Do you have any data governance compliance frameworks that you have to follow?
As it goes, for some of our California customers, we do have a few data privacy things that have to be adhered to, but we're not working in any sort of highly regulated space like SOC or PCI or HIPAA. That's not been as big of a factor for our business.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. Um, and as far as timeline, I know this is all VMware. Is there any kind of time constraint, like you have to be out of off a certain platform, from a certain provider within a certain time frame?
Yeah, so ideally for us, what we really want is to have our lift and shift of the servers done within the next 12 months. And we really need to be off of VMware entirely, made any changes needed to that also on the cloud in the next 18 months. So that's why we were kind of initiating this kind of strategy.
Good. That's great. Okay. Do you guys use any kind of like infrastructure as code for your deployment? How are you updating your either your code base, your application code, or even your infrastructure from a code? Are y'all doing any of that right now?
I have to talk to our systems people. I don't know exactly how much like of the DevOps level of work they've been doing inside the space. I know we've been trying to encourage them using more modern methods, even in our on-prem system for a little while, but I'm not sure how far along that is.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know. And your DevOps team, because we work with a lot of customers all over the place, right? And we do like to know, if there are time zone differences or, geographical differences. If we needed to get them on a call, would it be earlier in the day, later in the day, U.S. time?
Yeah, so most of our team is typically working around East Coast hours. We do have some folks who work over on the West Coast, few people in Texas, so obviously slightly different time zones, but typically the US Eastern hours are where most of our team is getting their day-to-day work in.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Um, can you give me, would you happen to have any kind of data or maybe you're invoicing for what your current infrastructure is costing you now? And that may seem like a weird question, but really what we want to look at is when we look at migrations, we're really looking, total cost of ownership and what does it take to get you there, right? So it'd be helpful if we had data on like your current utilization, even if it's just last month's invoice from your current provider. That'd be super helpful. Would you have access to that?
I have access to it. I don't have it on hand. So
That's no problem.
I would have to find that afterwards to send over to you, but yes, I can definitely get that.
Great, great. All right. And then if we needed to set up like a more in-depth discovery session, um, with your tech team, with your current provider, um, how soon could we get that scheduled? And when I say a working session, like it would be a much more in-depth, maybe a
Yeah.
couple hours, over a couple days.
So I would have to check their schedules, but as far as it goes, they understand it's a pretty high priority for us. So I'm sure we could get some time down in the next week.
All right. All right. Um, I think I have pretty much everything we might need to, but let me just kind of walk you through what we typically would do, right? Because we talk to a lot of folks every day who are currently leveraging a an environment like you described here, right? Where you have VMware hosted virtual servers in a dedicated data center, right? And a lot of times dedicated hardware comes with the constraints of potentially long-term contracts, right? You end up paying for the hardware that your virtual appliances are running on, right? And you don't really have that scalability or that flexibility or the economies of scale of a cloud provider, right? And that's really where innovative solutions comes in is our deep expertise in providing these migrations is not only to be able to provide like a comprehensive assessment of what your architecture looks like now, but then to be able to take that information and our our solutions architects are well versed in these types of migrations and be able to then translate that and look at what it would look like on AWS, right? In a cloud, in a more scalable um, architecture, and then provide you not only with what it would look like, but what it would take to get you there, right? The migration path. And there are lots of different options available to us as an AWS Premier Tier partner, via the Migration Acceleration Program. AWS, there's also some modernization. If these are mainly Linux instances, right? One of the things I kind of forgot to ask you about was like the database layer. Do you know what the database layer looks like?
Yeah, so we're using Oracle databases primarily. So as far as that goes, I don't know the exact number of how many databases we have set up, but I know we have Oracle databases and quite a fair bit of storage.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And that's kind of like really, I'm just looking for a high level view of what that is. Um, o- every database, language, every database architecture comes with its challenges, right? But none of these should be blockers to at least assessing the viability of a migration, right? So, honestly, I appreciate your time today. Do you have any questions for me, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, obviously our plan initially was thinking of lift and shift and then trying to figure out our best kind of exit from VMware. Again, I don't know if that is the best strategy. That's where we were leaning, but I didn't know if there was any deeper insight there.
We like to take a kind of a holistic view of these things, right? Because I think if we look at this like, well, every customer is kind of a cookie cutter, right? It's not the way that works, right? Now, there are some scenarios where like, oh yeah, we could do these. This is pretty much cookie cutter migration, but because everybody's different, and until we really get under there and look under the hood, you never know what you're going to find, right?
Yep.
Uh, you could say, we had this legacy system that we forgot actually exists in the same data center that's actually highly, important to our production systems, and it's not even in a virtual server. It's a physical and actual old server still running, still in that data center. We don't have a plan for how to migrate that because it's not virtual. It's an actual physical. And how would we do that? And we wouldn't find that out until we're actually digging in and going through and looking through there. But that's what our team really excels at, is really uncovering those parts of legacy systems, of potentially outdated systems, or even systems where you're like, we've outgrown our scalability. We've outgrown the agility with which we can develop because of our hardware, or because of our current hosting environment. How can AWS and an AWS partner help that? Right. And so that's really, we'll find that out, I think, with the in the next couple of calls. Um, we pride ourselves in being able to like kind of really kind of dig through that and find out. But I think we have a pretty good sense of what it was to even just like talk through what it could potentially look like, right, at a high level. But I appreciate your time today.
No, I appreciate it, Jeremiah.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears. What you
Yeah.
see here is, that it really did capture a lot of what we were talking about, right?
One of the things that I wanted to bring up in real time, but didn't want to interfere with the call, is on the side the talk ratio feedback. Um,
Yes.
it was something that would ebb back and forth as we talked. And for any salesperson, I mean, that is key to having an engaged conversation. Question rate, the concept tracking. Um,
This here pace and clarity, it always tells me to speak faster because I think it's my personal opinion. I'm like, I'd speak slow with the Texas accent, and I think it's engaged for someone else. And I'm like, that's just how I talk.
well, and you
Um,
also have probably done a lot of presentations for customers on relatively complex topics that really need to be slowed down a bit to be digested, while someone might be a little more of a fast talker and a more straightforward, consumable topic, right? So it
mhm.
probably depends a little bit there.
That's true. I will mention this. A lot of what you see on the left-hand side, the call coach, um, that's fully customizable. In other words, if you don't want to talk about timeline, technical requirements, budget, decision criteria, if there's something else that's important for these calls, right? We can change that. Um, if there are different things, like some of the things we talked about, or some of the customizations we've offered, is these callers, whoever's, on the Darcy side, or whoever's, being called, need to mention, who do we send the DocuSign to? Who gets the signature? Who's the decision maker? Like, what's the close date? And those come up as the concept trackers, right? To make sure that they cover those. So I feel like we're going to throw off the next step just talking through this, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. So
People can
uh,
see it happen and they understand why it's happening because, again, they have access to this on the calls when using your tool.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you can see that the transcript runs almost real time. Um, there's like a 2 or 3 second lag there. Some of that could be my browser just going slow. But the question, a lot of times we do have some pretty good questions that come out of here. This I found super duper invaluable because sometimes I forget to ask about things like that. And then the call notes are things where, I was like, maybe I should write that down. I don't use it as much because Darcy's done such a great job of providing it within the summary itself that I find myself not needing to keep as many notes, which when I use this allows me to be present in the call, right? And really like um, actively listening to the customer as they talk.
When
So,
I'm on a call personally, um, if I'm having to be the engaged person speaking and being a part of it, I do not like to be the person who's primarily being counted on to take notes for that call. I think it reduces my ability to do the engaging presentation part of it, right? And look, no one want. I've been the note taker. I've been the presenter on various calls, but I'm not gonna lie. Most of us don't want to be the note taker. We really do. We're on this call. We want to be a part of it, right? And it's nice that Darcy's able to do that in a way where, for the most part, again, you might have certain notes where you're like, this is mission critical. I can't leave this behind. I got to write that down, which is great. It's there. But
Hmm.
Darcy, for again, all of this stuff has just been jotting all of it down without you having to
Yeah,
do anything extra.
exactly. I didn't have to. I mean, we're just talking, right? So now that Darcy isn't recording the meeting, this would typically be the workflow is that we would have ended the call and then the Darcy meeting is kind of there, out there as having, it's a completed meeting now. And it gives you the full transcript and a full summary. And you have there's could be some action items in there, but I'll show you what that looks like now so that you can kind of see what the next steps would be because just having the meeting recording, doesn't is really just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do. Let me grab
Yeah,
this
because
out
there's a
here.
lot of little note taking tools out there, summary tools that I'm sure plenty of people are using on their calls, and it's great that this is doing that. And I do like the context towards this consulting call that it offered. But there's next steps, right? This is step one. So this is kind of these next steps are actually really where the conversation that Jeremiah initially had about this podcast, where they kind of focused on, because it's really for, I think, a consulting company who's trying to pitch customers some pretty exciting stuff that can be generated.
Right. Now, what you'll notice here is because we kind of mixed our topics of the call, it caught a lot of it, right? So it honestly it catches everything. And you can see that this was the third podcast. And then the demonstration showed the rule capabilities during customer discovery call, right? And then we talked about the lag key features.
Look,
I did do
simulated
that.
discovery call.
Yeah.
It
So
knows the difference.
it does. A customer profile simulated e-commerce platform, but this is what we really were looking for, right? Now there's a couple of things I could do here. Um, and really what I want to show you is what would be the next step, right? Which would be the SOW builder workflow, right? Because what we would typically do is take this meeting where we have the full technical setup, um, and then you see the full transcript there of the call. You can see where I was saying check, check, check. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Zoomed in. And see, this is all the detail where I'm like, it may not be relevant to the call, but Darcy's not going to necessarily add it, but later on they might, right? I mean, it really just depends on what she's listening to. Uh, these links are really more helpful live when we're like on a troubleshooting session. But if I look at my notes, you'll remember when I wrote 100 servers, mainly Linux,
Yep.
and there it is, right? So then if I go over to my workflows, I'm going to go down to our SOW. Oh, wait, missed it. SOW builder workflow. And I'm going to call this one um, Darcy demo migration on podcast July 24th. And I'm going to say review the meeting with Chris Youngblood and provide a, and you don't necessarily have to do this every time. We have a kind of quick prompts button too, but I'll just do a part of migration project. I don't have to say Sal. A lot of what is going to happen and a lot of the deliverables are already built into the workflow, right?
Yep.
I'm really just giving it like what I want it to do. And then I can either drag or drop files here. Like, let's say on the call, we talked about, hey, do you have any architecture diagrams? Do you have your current invoice?
Asset lists and
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff. So you actually know what the environment looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. If you'd had that at the time, I'd have dropped it in here. I don't necessarily have to have it though. I'll just go to my meeting transcripts and there's the demo where we were just talking. Add it. I'm going to hit next steps. And what Darcy's going to do right now is look at what I've asked it, which really was just it was very simple ask, right? Because I know that a lot of the stuff's already built into the workflow, but it's going to ask me for some clarifying questions. The other thing I could have said was, ignore anything relating to the podcast or ignore anything that's not about the migration. And we said, details about the current infrastructure. Can you provide more details? We didn't really talk about this current network VLAN subnets, breakdown of virtual physical service and the resource allocation. So I'm just going to choose the bottom one. Now, some of these things you're like, well, we didn't really talk about that on the call, but let's look at preferred migration, lift and shift versus replatforming. And then anticipating growth and scalability. What are the critical technical compliance migrations, right? You can add your own, or you can take one of these presets. And these change continually, right? Because the model is looking at what you've already supplied and saying if there are other questions. And it's essentially it's rewriting the entire prompt that's going to give it. And there are, the workflow itself also has prompts as well. And so then we hit start. And what we'll see is this is what we call our workflow. And each of these workflows, these tasks on the left are going to be the actual deliverables or the artifacts that it's going to create. So we'll get a project overview, a business case, responsibilities, the initial system design, an architecture diagram, scope and assumptions, and a story epic breakdown, all within the next 4 or 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's got to
Sometimes it
process
takes,
a little bit. Gen AI.
it is, it's Gen AI. It does take it a while. Could I have thrown it in chat, got something the same? Maybe, but our Darcy chat is part of our entire Darcy like solution. These workflows, though, they're very specific for innovative solutions because what it's doing is formatting exactly how we would need it for internal processing, for presentation to the customer in a standard format that allows the sales team, rather than to have to go through, continually change stuff up, reformat stuff, it's there, right?
Yeah, it's already in it. And for the customers you'd sell Darcy to, it's something you can work with them to establish these types of workflows with whatever letterhead they need and formats they need for the projects they're taking, right? So it's one of those things where this is specific to innovative, but in a way where it can be malleable to whatever different companies need.
Yes, and we've really kind of um, put a lot of effort into that customization extensibility through custom integrations, through multi-context protocols, through custom knowledge bases, um, lots of different stuff under the hood, right? And honestly, I get excited talking about the Darcy tool because I started as just a user, right? And the team was like, "Hey, do you think you could find a way, or think about what you do every day and how many repeated tasks you do?" And really, what that led to was like rethinking, what do I do every day? Because I do a lot, and how much of this is just the same thing over and over again. And having kind of been on that initial adoption group of folks, right? It's really been amazing to kind of watch how it all kind of come together, right?
Yeah.
Um, we have internal weekly, like we call them lunch and learns, like training sessions. I'm not a trainer. I just like hearing my own voice, but we come out of those with some of the greatest ideas. I'll give you an example. Today, someone was like, we have these tag actions for these workflows. Why can't we do like time-based tag actions? So at the end of every Friday, rather than have to run through a workflow and do my weekly updates, why can't I just say, hey, it's Friday at 3 in the afternoon. All my calls have happened. Run and do all my weekly updates for me. And that was just today. That was like, that's a great idea. I bet we could get it done. Um, anyway, just an example. Let me go back to sharing now. This part we do like the workflows do take a while, but at least we
Well,
have
it's
the
something you're not
first.
doing with a customer on the call. Admittedly, for presentation purposes like this, it's like most people, anyone who's done any sort of serious analysis with generative AI and longer workflows with multiple steps along the way, they understand there's a bit of a wait. It does tend to happen. It's not the instantaneous thing yet. Who knows? Maybe build enough data centers, we'll get there.
And that was the whole kind of the inspiration for this is that we would have scoping calls where we'd talk through discovery with the client and they would give us data, Excel spreadsheets with all their information, invoices, current architecture diagrams. And they were having to come back and kind of manually process that and then do the assessment of what does that migration look like, right? And then build
Weeks.
out this out. Weeks, weeks. It would be weeks. You're absolutely
We're
right.
complaining
Weeks.
about a few minutes right now, but we're talking about weeks of work here.
Yeah. 2 to 3 week turnaround. And, for that to be like down to even at the most 10, 15 minutes, if you get off a call in the morning, can you
I
have a
think
sow after lunch?
I think
Potentially.
people would take that trade off. And again, it's one of those things where there's always going to be the mix of the human element too, right? Because you're kind of trading responsibility back and forth with a lot of these AI tools. What you're able to do is take tons of time off in kind of brute, like you mentioned, what do I repeat? But there's also kind of like brute force elements of jobs. And it's not that they aren't necessary and need to be done. It's that to some extent, there's certain obvious factors that might need just a little context or refinement afterwards. But taking all the time that of an expert who could just do that context and refinement and having them focus on all of that brute force, it's just not a good use of time for people who built up specialized skills.
Yep. Yep. Now I did do the first. Now while we were talking, it did complete the first project overview, which actually this one's pretty. This part is typically pretty important, right? A comprehensive infrastructure migration initiative to transfer VM based on-premise infrastructure to AWS cloud. It involves migrating 800 virtual servers on 100 physical, primarily hosting Linux workloads and Oracle databases. Right. Primary goal is lift and shift within 12 months to fully exit VMware within 18 months, while ensuring minimal disruption of their e-commerce platform serving US-based retailers. And it gives you key points, requirements, business impact, technologies agreed upon, implementation priorities. All of these things are things that we would have had to take a lot of time to kind of digest and then
But still,
document, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, as you can see, it's still running through the business case ROI. It'll get to the responsibilities. We should get a full breakdown of all these things. I'll let it run, and we can come back to it in just a second. But it did this part, the business case ROI, for some reason, this one, it's doing a lot of work. I know specifically just for that task, it does a lot of stuff there, right? Um, that typically takes the longest. And so, but once it's through that, the way this workflow system works is it's taking this initial task, which is the project overview, and then this is being processed by this next task. So they're running sequentially and building on each other.
yeah, it actually kind of reminds me of a discussion I had with a colleague earlier this week where we were talking a little bit about generative AI and that joke that it's actually kind of difficult to prompt AI to say the exact same thing 2 times in a row because it's generating every time you prompt it. So you have to say things like, if I wanted it to repeat what it just said and I want to make no changes, I'd have to get really specific. I need you to repeat your previous response character for character with zero deviations. Like you're creating so much layer to say, I wanted exactly that. And it will still take time processing, like, well, let me look at each character and copy it one at a time because it wants to just generate something new every time. And that's why you can do things like where I generate something like a project overview that is then used to generate something like a business case, an ROI, which is interesting because again, you're still working off the initial data set, but it's extrapolating and abstracting further to get there.
Yeah, and the other thing is each of those steps in the project. I'll switch back over in just a second. I was going to say run. You can go back and say, well, this wasn't really what we talked about, or you can say, I only want to rerun this part, and it'll run that step, but then it'll iterate through the following steps as well. So you can even start at the top and just change a couple of things, right? You're like, well, they decided they don't want to do all 800 virtual servers. Let's do 400, right? And then rather than have to rerun the whole workflow or have the whole meeting again, you just change the numbers and let it go, right? And it'll rerun that based on those changes that you've made. Um, I was hoping this thing would go faster because I really do I want you to see once that business case ROI one's done, the rest of them go so much faster. But it's like just waiting for that one to finish.
The dangers of a live demo, especially on a podcast for everyone, right? The
No.
amount of times I have been demoing a piece of technology in my life of all sorts, and something that has never gone wrong. So at least this one, you know it's happening. The business case and ROI takes particular levels of processing. But sometimes for me, I'd be demoing a product and it's like something that's never gone wrong finally goes wrong. So I don't even know how to explain it because I don't know what happened yet.
Yeah. And see, here's our initial prompt that remember we answered those couple of questions and it rewrote our prompt. You can go in here, make changes. We're like, no, uh, we don't need performance benchmarking, right? Or you know what, compliance isn't really an issue for us, right? I don't know why you would do that, but you could if you wanted to, right?
Yeah.
And then hit save, and then it would rerun through the workflow, right? It's gonna do that based on your changes. I don't want to change it, so I'll click off of it. Let's see. Oh, business case ROI finished. There we go. So here we go. So here we can see complete migration within 12-month timeline, achieve exit within 18 months, realize minimum 20% cost, right? Um, Measurement approaches, total cost of ownership, application performance, latency, and a lot of this stuff, we developed this internally because these are the things that are important for our customers that we've worked with previously. And so we see migration case studies. Uh, my we've told it to cite the sources where it's getting these labor cost reduction, um, and then competitive position, right? It's giving us a whole lot of useful information that, as far as the,
And a lot of it's the kind of TCO stuff you'd see when you do a proper TCO analysis. So like actually seeing that like the infrastructure savings that you can expect, that that takes some time to be able to generate those numbers usually.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And with accuracy, right? But allowing the team to be able to do that and see, like in the time it took us to read that, now we're on the responsibilities breakdown, right? Here you can see customer technical responsibilities, internal resource, business requirements, and then here's what we are responsible for. All of these are I say pretty standard, but it's as an AWS migrations partner, we do a lot of these. This is the stuff we have to have documented, right? To be able to
Yeah.
present not only to the customer, to the AWS, if there's going to be any kind of funding. And
For
then,
viewers in the partner community, they know that there's very specific things, whether you're an AWS partner, Azure partner, whatever, there's things that hoops that you have to jump through if you want to achieve funding opportunities, greater status as and the partner paths, things that are going to make you more successful in the AWS ecosystem as a partner. So like stuff like this to generate these artifacts, huge.
yeah, yeah. And it's just, it's already, like I said, it builds one after the other and to the other. Right, here comes our initial system design. It'll keep going all the way through until finally we get a story epic breakdown, scope and assumptions. And then we can actually even um, generate documents directly from the workflow, which
Yeah.
I'm excited to show you as long as as long as it keeps going. Uh,
Responsibilities is a lot quicker than business case, so we're getting there.
it was. Architecture diagram usually goes really quick. Typically, honestly, the value for me is like I hit this, I let it run. I don't have to sit here with the browser and wait for it,
Yeah.
right? I'm just like,
We're
I'm
doing that
going to
right
the next
now.
thing.
So
I forget about it.
it's kind of like watching the kettle boil right now. So you're actually looking at it, but so it feels longer. But you're right. Like these are things that happen in the background. It's like when I click download a video that my parents sent me to my Google Drive or something, and it's like, oh, 10%, 20. I don't need to watch it happen. I can go do something else. It's going by itself. Now imagine that's with actual work that usually has to be hands on.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. I really like, I don't have to watch it, but I'm kind of now I'm mesmerized. I'm like, it's been a while since I've really watched and see how long it takes because like I said, what we would typically do, kick the workflow off. Um,
when we did this with a 10-minute conversation, right? So
yeah, we did.
there's going to be factors obviously is about like how much detail is there. Imagine if we had like a 2-hour working session. There's going to be a lot. Now admittedly, what's interesting is there's probably going to be more details for the AI to work with, which might make certain things easier where it doesn't have to assume as much and make stuff up, which can use it. So there's just a lot of different ways it can play out. It's very interesting.
You bring up a very good point there, Chris, right? Um, by providing it even more information. Like let's say it had all of like the full Excel spreadsheet that we would typically fill out or ask a customer to fill out about their current infrastructure, right? These VMs, this operating system, this much RAM, this much CPU, this much disk space. We had all those and we gave it all as attachments within the original workflow request, right? Um, Maybe we gave it the most current invoice in a PDF format, right? File size in a workflow, the way this is designed, it really never um, comes into a factor because I think, and I'll have to get back with you on the details because it changes all the time. But you know, where we would typically use the chat function of Darcy, if we put it in a workflow, we get like 50 times the file size and we can put as many of these files as possible because it's really chunking through. And maybe that's a great point. And if if our product team was here, they'd be like, yeah, that's absolutely why. It's having to infer a lot of this stuff because it was just a very, very high level discussion. Right.
I've seen it with AI in a lot of different things where you're just asking it to generate more, which is odd when you like, just if you think like, oh, I'm trying to make this easy for you, right? I'm not trying to throw too much your way. And it's like, well, actually, it would prefer it if you threw a little more its way.
It absolutely would. It's like, the more I have to know up front, the less I have to infer, right? The less I'm gonna have to just kind of figure out, right?
And honestly,
Um,
it's not dissimilar from an actual hands-on consulting process. If you don't know enough, what are we doing? Setting up future working sessions, trying to do more email back and forth, whatever it takes to get to that, story epic breakdown. It takes longer if you start with less information than a traditional process too.
yeah. I'm afraid to click. I don't want to click. I want to
Yeah,
just let it
leave it
finish.
be.
I'm gonna let it finish. I'm gonna let it. I was gonna switch to another tab and show you even more because I get excited, right? I get
Yeah.
excited about this, but I'm like, no, calm down, take it
No,
easy.
I did that the other day where it was actually you were talking about videos, and on my little dash cam, I had got one recently, so I was trying to download something from it onto my phone, and then I leave the app, and I go back, it was at 0%. I'm like, oh, this is when you gotta leave the app up. Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah, I do that too, right? We our chat function within Darcy. Um we like to allow we've really extended that chat feature, right? Because um you can chat about what you're actually looking at the time, right? So like if, in our meeting, I could have opened the chat and asked it questions or told it to do something in the meeting while we're on the meeting.
Yeah.
Um but there's also the ability to kind of save your progress. And if you don't do it, it there it's nuanced, right? Using
Yeah.
chat live while it's on the call. Um, and I did accident. It was my fault. I messed it up and I overwrote what was already there. But then I just asked Darts, I was, hey, can you remember that summary you made? Can you just remake that again? Yeah, sure. And it was like, yeah, sure. It's
I
even
say, did
kind
it
of
get a previous
factory.
version, or did it try to make a new one?
It overwrote what I had, right? Because I asked it, I was like, can you just make this a little more geared to an internal audience? And those are the types of customizations that we're being asked for all the time, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's really comes down to that customizable factor of the Darcy tool, right? It was very, very much for us. And now that other people are kind of seeing it and seeing what it can do, they're like, well, make it for us too. And we're like, you know what? That's not that hard. Let's make it for you too. Uh, I get
It's
excited.
you made Tailwinds for people to use. Like, yes, you wanted to use it internally, but you actually made that as an external customer facing product, and you made this with Tailwinds again. Like you said, we want to eat our own dog food, right? We want to show that we're about this. Somehow you got two products out of it.
I know, right? And then I think Darcy came out of like we had an internal game day for Tailwinds, and there were several teams that did really well.
It was like a hackathon type of
Yeah. Oh,
situation.
I think that's what we called it. Actually, it was a hack. No, I don't. I think we called it. I don't remember what we called it. But either way,
I feel like if you're not coding,
Darcy,
you can't call it a hackathon. That's like a personal slight towards coders.
I would agree. I would agree. It was more like a game day, right? We split up into teams. Um, but a couple of the teams had small ideas that when we take a look at them as a whole, I was like, that's a really great idea. And we kind of changed them together. And if you've ever met Travis Rail, our CTO, um, he's the type of guy who can take those ideas and be like, let me figure something out. Um, he's yeah, it's amazing to watch his brain. And you can't watch his brain work. There's no way anybody would understand it.
I've met a few of those people where you see something hit them and you see gears start moving, and then you won't hear from them for a week or two, and then they're going to come back at you with way more than you expected. And you're like, where did all of this come from?
Yeah, and I'm a night owl, right? And it's amazing how many times I'll be awake and I'm not necessarily working, but my laptop's within reach. And I'll get a Slack message and Trevor's like, "Hey, you want to try something real quick?" And I'm like, "Why are you awake at this hour?"
Same person I'm thinking of. I'll see them uploading like, files and stuff at like 6, 7 a.m. And just like, man,
Yeah. And people are like, "Why did you send that email at 1:30?" I was like, "Well, I was done writing it, so I hit send." So,
I was up.
yeah, I was like, "I was up."
Admittedly, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm one of those people who might start answering a few Slack messages and emails if it's like, oh, I got a quick answer there and I want to make sure they have it when they get in. It's like, why were you up at 4? I'm like, well, the real question is why was I answering you at 4, not why I was up. That's every day.
Yeah. I was like, "That's really when my juices were flowing." I'm like, I might as well just
I
write
saw it.
down
I
what I
had an
think.
answer. I gave it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I'm like, well, that's when the workflow finally finished running.
The,
Oh,
writer, the writer's block finally wore off, right? That's what it is.
let me switch back because now we do have our initial system design. And when it says like, here's the architecture design summary, migration services, EC2 for Linux, RDS for Oracle or Aurora, Lambda for serverless, auto scaling for seasonal traffic, CloudWatch for monitoring, dependencies, VMware, Oracle database, Python Angular, right? Existing Linux OS, network connectivity, assessment and planning phase,
Now,
database migration, application modernization. Now we have, it's got a thing. Now we have architecture diagram.
there it is.
Yeah, there it is. And you can download these. You can get it as PDF. You can open it with Eraser. You can download it. I think the file is a mermaid file. Um, this button here, I mean, I don't want to spoil it. This is our storyboards, which is a completely different feature. You can change it. You can edit it, right? I can go back up here to the initial system design. I can edit it and be like, yeah, you know what? That's not really, we want to change this up. Like this timeline is not accessible, but based on 800 virtual servers and 100 physical servers, right? This really not only does it get us to that 12-month timeline, but it takes that into account, right?
Yep.
And then this is what it looks like, right? This is essentially what it looked like. And what we've really put a lot of thought is what you don't really necessarily see in the background is that this is also we want to make sure this is aligned to the pillars of well architected, right? Um, because that is something we should always build,
Yep.
right? We're going to build it and then we're going to migrate and put it in. It should be well architected, which really is the purpose of the well architected framework, right? And those
Mentioned
pillars.
earlier, you guys are AWS partners. You built this workflow to make sure it's compliant with really what you're trying to deliver for customers based on your partner status, right? Like that's a company initiative and priority for you. But for whoever you sell this to, they might have their own company initiatives, priorities, and you can act accordingly when designing your workflows.
Exactly, exactly. And then we have our general, here's our scope of work, right? Uh, here's our project scope. This is what's going to be in scope. Here's the general additional assumptions, dependencies. Here's our deliverables. Um, Out of scope is built in, infrastructure components. All of this is, based on what our um, partnership with AWS and our own internal like documentation processes require us to document, right? And say,
Yeah.
you got to say what's in scope, what's out of scope. That anybody who's ever done a scoping project knows that that's what you do. And this would have taken, you know, an architect, an engineer, potentially, someone from the project management team, 2, 3 weeks to come up with in this
And
format.
the biggest thing here, I think that it changes because again, you're still going to want these folks involved. You're still trying to put your best foot forward on deals. But for anyone in this business, how many times have you spent 2 to 3 weeks putting together, your best pitch and the customer then just doesn't buy?
Yeah.
You lost the deal, right? You just spent 3 weeks on losing, and that's rough. And I get it. That's been a part of the job traditionally, but um, to be able to take this much time off, it's staggering.
Yeah, exactly. And then this will be the story epic breakdown, which is typically um, because we
More
use
like the
Jira.
actual, yeah, Jira project management. Because I come from more of that software development kind of space than data center space, and sitting in Jira and understanding how you really plan out a roadmap and all that, that is much more familiar to me.
Yeah, and that's really what this, as if it ever finishes, right? Um, that's really what it comes down to. It's like being able to take how long do we talk? 12 minutes maybe about
Yeah,
it?
like 10, 15 minutes
Yeah.
maybe.
We talked less time than it took us to run the workflow, but the workflow really is cutting out so much more time
Yeah,
that, you know,
because
it's
all of that extra time, again, like we said, if we lacked information after that call, we're immediately having to plan all these extra discovery calls so that we can hopefully get the information we need to either win or lose this deal in like 3-ish weeks, maybe.
yeah.
Um, it's something where cutting this down to, even if it goes 20, 30 minutes of assessing, it's already given us here. I mean, if you just go to, I think if we go back to the business case and ROI, this stuff alone takes a very long time when you're talking about the financial impact of moving to the cloud. That takes some time to get to.
Hmm.
That is not usually a quick process.
Yep.
And to be able to look at that in such a good breakdown based on this short conversation we had, it's pretty insane, I would say.
Yep. Infrastructure cost saves $540,000 annually. VMware license elimination. I mean, that's a huge, huge decider for folks who are looking to migrate is how I think we're all aware of, the licensing changes for VMware, right?
Yep.
Um, Operational efficiency by moving to whether it's containerization, just modernization of the application layer or infrastructure as code, right? Being able to cut down on that, right? And then you see even in this kind of the ROI, you see kind of those hints of the well architected, right?
Yeah.
Cost, efficiency, operations, they're all kind of in there, right? Competitive position. How does this affect you for the rest of your e-commerce folks, right? Enhanced security compliance. 94% of enterprises use cloud services for their e-commerce, right? Customers expect that 99.9%. Even though we talked about that we don't really have an SLA, there's an expectation that when you have your store up, people can buy from you, right? And that kind of feeds into this, right?
That's the thing. Like this kind of stuff here, it takes a very long time to get to all of these numbers. And like the system design and architecture, it's pretty tough, but I think it's maybe a little bit understated how difficult sometimes getting this much together is. And if you really think about actually trying to work with a customer to initiate a migration, the financial elements, all this stuff, this is the incentive for their migration, right? It's not a good architecture design, even though that's a necessary component to making it happen, right? So
Hmm.
this kind of stuff is just so compelling from, trying to get in front of a customer and for it to do it without, again, you can look at all this afterwards. You can do your due diligence, but it just saved you pages and pages of analysis.
Yeah. And then there's still a human component, right? Because we've generated this with Darcy, with our generative AI assistant. But there's still internally, there's a review process
Yeah.
where someone's
I
going
need
to
to
look
know,
at
was it
this.
actually 100 physical servers and 800 virtual, or is it 100 servers and 868 to be very, very exact for virtual servers? Is it, what your storage environment, like what does your storage landscape look like? Like how much storage is there? What do you spend on kind of your infrastructure supporting said storage, and how does AWS affect that? You might be a very storage heavy business. Um, so there's just a lot that could be done to obviously refine from this very short conversation that we had to generate this. But I found it just really cool that even with that short conversation for we have 800 servers, it start thinking, okay, cost per server, what are the typical infrastructure overhead costs and labor costs of a data center versus AWS, and being able to present that in a way that is probably pretty familiar for anyone in like the TCO AWS space. It's just very cool.
Yes, yes, yeah, man, we're still waiting on that story epic, but come on, it's almost done. Maybe architecture diagram. I mean, that seems a little simple, but it's still nobody had to click and drag little shapes around, right?
No, and
Um,
the system design is really the hard part that leads to the architecture diagram. Once you've gotten all the system design pieces in place, you're really just adding a visual to it from there.
hmm hmm
So the fact that it can come up with the system design, and then, okay, now that this makes sense, we can actually tie this to the architecture based on all the different elements that we've set up here.
hmm Yep, yep, yep. And then, well, if this ever finishes, I did want to show you what it looks like when it actually generates the docs because we have that configured too, where it'll throw it into our um, actual like scope of work,
Yeah.
company letterhead, ready to go. It highlights. It's highlighted in red. I mean, I'm sorry, in yellow. It's like everything in yellow, leave blank because that goes through our, our CRM. Um, but the scope and assumptions, the responsibilities, all that's directly fed from this workflow. In other words, they don't have to go in and copy paste anything into the doc, convert it to a PDF, and then send it for approval. It's there. It's ready to go. They could just click and drag it right into the CRM, right? Um, I've never seen a story epic take so long. I'll let it run. Um,
Sometimes these things vary. Again, different assumptions. Generative AI,
live demo.
live demo luck, right? That's how these things work. But admittedly, that's going to be useful for just when you're thinking from a project management standpoint. I've done all of these things, and now I can actually show a customer, in a timeline and breakdown of work, what it would look like in a nice little project board, which I think most people watching, they probably are familiar with the idea of a staged out project board. When we started this call, I think something else I do want to see, if possible, when this wraps up, because I don't want to stop it and then we don't get the output right. But something you showed me the other week was how it's like showing the hours that were saved through the work Darcy did on this particular workflow, right? Like
Yeah.
as opposed to an essay having to sit down and bang their head against this thing. How long did they think this would have taken an essay versus what Darcy put together? I loved that because
Yes.
again, it kind of lets your essays use their expertise to make sure they're refining and doing due diligence on this output, but not having to bang their head against every deal, regardless of if it's going to close or not.
Yes. Um, I was trying to figure out I could show it to you without killing this. Oh, you know what? I can. I'll share my other screen because I just opened it up
That's
on
what
the
new
other
windows
screen.
are for.
Exactly. There we go. Now this is my metrics over the last however long, since February, right? So in February I did 23 tasks, 15. May I did 84 tasks. And so for over that total time, um, I've saved 418 hours.
Yep.
Just me personally. Now these are very user specific, right? But as you can see, I use a lot of workflows all the time, right? Um, we even have a feature where we can do tags and then tags kick off workflows, right? So I don't even have to actually kick off the workflow. I tag a meeting as with a certain tag, and it auto kicks off the workflow at the end of the meeting, right? And that's a whole other feature that uh, not that it's not interesting. When
I
I think
mean,
about
it is for the sake that if you have a salesperson and a solutions architect, a few people who are trying to get these deals at, and I saw you had like multiple workflows, like the cost optimization review that you mentioned there. There's the SOW builder, different timelines associated for time saved. But it does help these folks working with the tool do understand the impact, right? We all know the generative AI, it's helping me be more efficient, but sometimes actually understanding what that actually means from a metric standpoint, it's nice.
yeah.
It's like I'm going running. I know I'm probably doing good things for my health, but this little smartwatch that tells me I'm burning X calories and steps and all does gamify it a bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you look at that and you're like, it really was worth it if I spent an hour or two like really, really defining and like really, really uh honing on honing in that workflow that I created, right? And it's very specific for my team or folks in my role, right? But it turns around and it saves each of I've, six other teammates on my team, and each of them are doing the same thing 3 times a day. That's 18 times a day that I've saved that 2 hours with just 1 or 2 hours of investment up front. And I've made all our lives easier, right? And that's been, I love when we get on like internal training or lunch and learns and you see folks think about it really is a mindset shift. What am I doing every day? Really, what am I doing every day? And how much of that is the same thing over and over again? And how can I use what we're already building for other folks for me, right? And
I've
it's
I've led
been
training courses before, and I remember in the past, before the generative AI days, you usually know your subject you're training on, but you want to get the like actual content exactly right for how you're presenting it. So maybe I'm teaching new folks about certain very basic AWS topics, like this is what EC2 is what S3. And you go to AWS's site to make sure you're saying it exactly how they say it. So there's like a lot, but is that a good use of my time? Something I already know from the past, but I'm making sure we just get it. Well, all I have to do is say, hey, Chat GPT or Gemini or whoever I'm talking to today, um, I need you to make basically give me the text for a presentation slide that exactly explains this thing. And the thing is, I get what I need. I can maybe make a few tweaks, but I spent so much less time doing something that is good for our company, has to happen, but is it the best use of my time? That's why these tools are great. I don't think we're at a point where they're taking our jobs, but a lot of our jobs are doing things that I don't think are our most valuable inputs, if that makes sense.
100%. And just the stuff I've shown you today, like I said, for me personally, it's allowed me to become a much better active listener. Um, to slow down when I talk, right? To really, really like hear the customers, what are they actually trying to solve for? What do they really need? How important is this to them, right? Um, and the ability to just kind of maintain eye contact. I mean, it's common courtesy, right? To maintain eye contact and be like, yeah, let's pull on that string a little bit more.
And to actively
Um,
listen. Anyone who's been on a sales call knows there's what they say with their words and there's what they say with how they said it. And you can't notice that without, yeah, the eye contact, like seeing, like being able to focus on that. But even when you have cameras off, if you listen closely, you start to hear maybe hesitations and pauses and things that say, hey, this person wants to go further here. They're not saying it, but it's your opportunity to act on that. But if you are buried in your notes and you're thinking, oh, what's the next question that I have? And what's the this? What, you're going to lose it.
yeah, yeah,
So that was one of those things I thought was very cool about all those different meeting notes. The fact that, for instance, if you saw on the talk ratios that the customer had said like 10% of the words the whole time, you're like, I got to figure out how to change this. That's not good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I honestly do love the call coach. It's been super helpful because it's like you've talked for too many questions or the questions. You've asked 26 questions, right? That's really good. You've asked three questions, right? I'm like, yeah, I really should be really asking way more questions. And that's why it gives us those questions at the bottom. It's like, hey, ask this instead. Um, yeah. Yeah. Oh, we've got the final, we've got the
Storyboard?
story epic breakdown. Yeah, let me pull it up.
Hey,
Yeah, here's our
not
story
there.
epic breakdown. There
So
it
there you
is.
go, guys. In a half hour, you get all the artifacts needed.
Yep. And it tells you, cloud engineer, how many hours, cloud architect, cloud engineer, operations handover, it's all there, estimated hours, and you can download it, um, drop it straight into Jira if you need
Yeah.
to. Yeah. 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 Your epics, your stories, your new tasks, ready to go.
I mean, it's fantastic. As far as it goes, this is something that, I've been involved in a few times in the past where when we're working with our SAs, with our salespeople who are like trying to obviously move things, include all these different people trying to have things happen. And whether we close the deal, we don't close the deal, it's just such a significant lift. Even when you do close it, and it's just slowing things down. A customer really loves it when you can get something in front of them as quickly as possible. Not some, it's got to be good. It's got to solve the problem they have. Um, Most people don't say, "Hey, I need this thing," and then you're like, "Cool, I'll talk to you in a month."
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just give you one real quick, like cool thing, right? You see the Darcy chat here.
Yep.
I'm going to open Darcy chat. I'm going to go down here to one of my little quick prompts. Maybe. Oh, it wasn't working earlier. And then we say, create a customer facing. I don't know why my little quick prompt isn't working. Probably because I knew I was going to be doing a live demo.
Yeah, it's how it always is. They probably have it already fixed in a sandbox environment, but it just hasn't been pushed to production for you.
Or they'll be like, have you cleared your cache and cookies?
They'll have
And
you unplug it and plug it back in.
yeah. And it's going to go through and it usually goes
That's happened
really
to me twice
fast.
this week of me closing something and opening it again. And I've been like, man, this has to stop happening.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Here's our customer facing email through my thing in there. It says recommendations, you know, there it is. And it's an artifact that I can then download It's marked down if I want. I can get it. I can get it in work. And then let's say I say, make it shorter. It'll actually um, version the artifact itself. So I can be like, you know what? I did like that first version, but I get the access to both of them now. Anyway, just something to, I'll let it finish.
No,
So
and that
yeah,
is good because as we said earlier, you want to have that like a version control there instead of just no generate the first one again because that's
yeah,
not always
yeah,
the easiest method.
yeah, yeah. And then you just change your version, and now it's not working.
But then when you
Yeah, but you can
ultimately
always
doing a bunch of processing again to go view something you could have just kept in an S3 bucket.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, see, there's a first version, second version, and I'll just close out that chat. Let me close this out. Ugh. And there's my workflow. Anyway, yeah. I would typically have saved that as an artifact and, reference to later, but, for the sake of this, I wanted to just kind of give you that. Um,
No,
yeah.
I mean, it's super cool. And I know that, we had set aside, honestly, we are 3 minutes over and it's pretty good, all things considered. We covered a lot of ground there. And we even got a little bit of a hiccup in the middle where we were trying to go from the initial call phase to the actual part where you and your team will be looking at the Gen AI afterwards, creating the artifacts. But I think we got the point of what we want to do in this podcast. Again, for the people in this consulting business, most of you know this process. It's probably extremely familiar, especially if you're an AWS partner. Most of what you just saw is familiar to you, but I imagine you spent quite a bit of time doing it. Sure that your method of doing it might be a little different from Jeremiah's, but this tool, Darcy IQ, is made to be customizable, just like with Tailwinds, to your specific business environment with this initial focus on consulting workflows and business. So that's why I want to have Jeremiah on because that's a big part of us over here at ReluTech. These are all the different folks we work with, these big multi-partner kind of deals where a bunch of different partners are working together to try and close stuff. I've seen all of them struggle with these things. So as soon as you showed it to me like a month or two ago, I was like, we got to get this on the podcast.
Yeah. And, it's constantly, I've never seen tech landscape change so quickly. Uh,
I wasn't
it,
I was a kid during the early internet age, but that's like the last I can think of when like websites were getting better and better every year. Like operating systems went from like really blocky and ugly to like really nice looking in like a year. Like Windows 95 to Windows XP, that was like 3 years apart.
yeah. 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 And folks who were like, they took vacation last week.
Yep.
They were in the training session the week before. They come back and I'm like, yeah, we've got like 5 new features to show you. And
Taking off work's way harder these days. You already had to play catch up in the past, but man, I feel like I am drowning when I get back these days.
yeah, I mean, it's so fast, right? And you just got to kind of hang on and
Yep, it's a roller
dive
coaster,
right
but
in.
that admittedly, the tech world I think has always felt that way. It's just we're in the current phase of rapid evolution, and I gotta say it's exciting. I think this tool is a very exciting piece of it, so I'm glad you're able to join us, Jeremiah, and make sure all our viewers understood some of the cool stuff going on because Gen AI tools, I know there's a lot of them that are trying to be really flashy for like consumer driven use cases, but we work in this business to business world where some of these little tools are a lot more like niche and focused. And this one here towards consulting companies, I mean, I knew from the start of Gen AI, I'm like, there's so many areas with consulting that are so work heavy and so repetitive. So I think this is an exciting tool. So for everyone who's interested, you can reach out to Innovative Solutions. Jeremiah is over there, and they would be glad to give you any sort of demos or further conversations about Darcy IQ because this is one workflow. There are many in there. Many that, for instance, he could show you that are geared towards the type of work he does at Innovative, but they are just now rolling this out to external users. So let them know. They'd be glad to walk you guys through it. Otherwise, Jeremiah, always glad to have you on. We'll get you on for a fourth one of these days when you guys come up with a new AI tool out of nowhere and you call me and say, let me show you something.
I'll be like, hey, remember Darcy? Well, this is even cooler.
We got the
But
next one.
yeah, yeah. Chris, always a pleasure, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jeremiah. We'll catch up again soon. And everyone, go check out Darcy.